Welcome back to A to Z here on Locked On Sports Atlanta, free on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you search Locked On Sports Atlanta. Catch up with all the great shows here on the Locked On Network. Not only is it A to Z, Hitting Hard with John Chuckery, ATL Day Ones with Jarvis Davis and Tanisha Batiste. Of course, our Braves postcast with Grant McCauley after every single Braves game, and Locked On Falcons and Locked On Hawks with Aaron Freeman and Brad Rowland, respectively. But we will now turn our attention to our friends at the Falcoholic. Oh, by the way, I remember the name of the D-tackle I was talking about from the Bears. Akeem Hicks was the name that I was thinking of, who's still a free agent out there that could be help for the Falcons on a one-year deal. But with all the news of Grady Jarrett, let's welcome in from that Falcoholic to help us do the draft and the latest news on Grady Jarrett. It is Kevin Knight joining us here on A to Z. Kevin, welcome. Good to talk to you, brother, and thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Mark. Excited to see your new show here. Here on Locked On. So
you and some of the poor bastards out there still listening. God bless you all. Let's start with Grady Jarrett. Look, I said earlier it was big news, right? It was big on multiple levels. It's big on the fact that, one, he chose to stay. It's big on the fact that, this is a guy that now not only, wants to be here, whether it's for football reasons or non-football reasons, but he's committed to the organization. It's great to see that other stars are going to hear from Todd France and from, Grady, that they were easy to work with and they made me want to stay. And despite the fact that we're not a great team right now, like that stuff reverberates throughout the rest of the league. And it's good signs for Terry Fontenot. And I think it also speaks to the fact that, this is a team right now that needs players. And one of them, their best one, chose to stay. And so these are all positive signs. I'm not saying a year from now he's not going to request a trade, but right now, initially, as we sit here on May 3rd, these are all positive signs for the Falcons.
Yeah. I mean, I think Grady returning is a big deal. It wouldn't have shocked anyone if he decided, like, look, I've spent the last 4 years on a losing team. I would really like to go somewhere else. And I think the Falcons could have got good value for Grady in such a trade, but him wanting to stay, I think, is really good and better for the team as a whole, because without Grady Jarrett, it's basically hopes and dreams. I mean, I like the guys in the draft that we're going to talk about and stuff like that, but it's hopes and dreams everywhere else. And without Grady Jarrett, you're starting completely from scratch. And with him here, obviously adjusting to the new scheme, it wasn't his best year last year, certainly. But I think he can definitely play in this defense. I'm sure Dean Pease has sold him on the defense at this point if he's agreed to sign this extension, and how he can get back to his extremely productive brand of football in the near future. But I think everything you said about him wanting to be here is a good sign. I think, the hope is that this is not as long a rebuild as we fear. Maybe we can start getting back closer to winning football next season. Some people think this season that's probably a little aggressive, but I do like the signing and the money, at least from what's been reported early. $17 million a year for Grady Jarrett, I think, is fantastic.
Yeah.
So that is a really good deal.
And you brought up a great point that I totally just missed before too, that remember, he is sort of transitioning position-wise. Like he could have easily found a competitive team, been in a 4-3, gone back to just mauling guys and looked like a superstar. That is also a big part. Like he's literally saying, I'm okay with not putting up the numbers I used to. I'm okay with, the idea that 3 years down the road now, when I become a free agent again, if you guys don't want me anymore, my value may be completely down because I don't have the numbers to support it. Because I've been playing out of position. That's another part I totally forgot about. I think that's a huge thing too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hope is that it's not going to. It's a little bit different, the 3-4 defensive end versus 4-3 defensive tackle. Sure. Obviously, I think they're still going to get him a fair amount of reps at 3 tech, depending on how they line up, and 4-eye is different as well. But I think especially towards the end of the season, I think you saw him start to get more comfortable. And I think, honestly, the production thing probably had more to do with the just total lack of supporting cast more than any sort of schematic change for him. I mean, it's really hard to get production on the interior when you don't have anything on the edge. People just step out and leave the pocket, and then Grady's just chasing air. So hopefully that will be fixed this year. And like I said, I think they did take some positive steps in the draft too.
Speaking of air, that's what the Falcons hope to do with Drake London, air it out, or at least to a certain extent, throw a lot of jump balls. Look, wide receiver was the one position I said, and I told it to Dave Cho to the Falcoholic that my puke factor was 0. I can't understand the process. I don't think Drake London is a bad pick. I said repeatedly I thought he was going to be the first wide receiver taken off the board. I get why big-bodied wide receivers like him are mismatch nightmares, and having them is super important. But to take pass catchers 2 years in a row with no offensive line to speak of, no running game, and questions at quarterback, at least for the next 2 to 3 years, it just seems like the process is out of order. It's not an indictment on Drake London as a player. It is an indictment, however, in my opinion, on the process.
Yeah, I mean, that was my issue with wide receiver. I think we have similar thoughts on that, is that I didn't like philosophically going wide
Yes.
receiver at 8, and it doesn't really have anything to do with Drake London. I mean, he was the 10th overall player on my board. I was leaning, Jermaine Johnson, and we'll see if I'm wrong about Jermaine Johnson, considering where he ended up going in the draft.
You
I
and the
was
rest of
leaning,
America, by the way.
right, yeah. Jordan Davis was someone I really liked, just his upside. I know defensive tackle that early is another sort of non-traditional position. And then Kyle Hamilton, I just loved as just an overall defensive star. So those guys were all just a little bit ahead of Drake London for me. But again, London's my wide receiver 1. He did fit the Falcons really well. He was the one I would have taken. And, you see right after they take him, like 5 more receivers go and, the next like 10 picks or something. So,
yeah.
It does sort of, it looks slightly better in hindsight. But at this point, it's just about getting the right player in here. They need to get the right guy in here. Then your first round pick, you have to knock it out of the park. So if he becomes a dynamic wide receiver 1, a top 10, wide receiver in the NFL, then no one's going to care in 3 years. But you really have to hit on that player, especially if you're going to take him at that sort of spot. And maybe he can get there. I know he's a lot of guys that are more wide receiver gurus than me, see him as the next Mike Evans, and that sort of thing. And time will tell. But as long as he's a good player, I'm not going to be too upset about it. Just draft good players.
Yeah, I mean, it is that simple, right? It's Belichickian, if you will. Just draft good players and everything seems to work out fine. That said, I think Arnold Ebiketie is a good player, but I think ultimately in 2 years, we are going to measure what is Jermaine Johnson versus what is Arnold Ebiketie, or anybody else for that matter, George Karlaftis, whoever it may be, that was all taken between, when they took Ebiketie as their first pass rusher and what they had available to them at 8 overall. And unfortunately, that's the context we're going to put it in. That's not always fair, but when we start to revisit drafts, that's ultimately what everybody does. This guy was available, you passed on him for this, you got this hand, and they got the other hand, and the other hand was better than what you got.
Right, exactly. And it'll be sort of, is Jermaine Johnson and, George Pickens, for example, is that duo better than Drake London and Arnold Ebiketie? And we won't know probably for 2 or 3 years, definitely which one is a better choice. I mean, I think you could certainly make the case for Drake London being the best receiver in this class, and maybe he will be. And then at that point, all Ebiketie needs to be is sort of on par with these other edge guys in the first round. Obviously, I like Jermaine Johnson better, but I think Ebiketie is a really good player. I mean, he was certainly someone I had as a high second rounder on my draft board in terms of grade. Someone I scouted fully and watched the Senior Bowl, and I just really like his game. I mean, anyone who comes from a lower level of competition like he was at Temple, and then goes to a higher level, Penn State, and then has his best season, I think that means a lot. Like, this is a guy that jumped up in competition and then had his best season ever. They played him all over the defensive line in his first year with the program. I mean, this is clearly a really smart player, someone who's still learning, pass rush technique and stuff like that, but a terrific athlete, speed, elite bender. Definitely fits the profile, and we'll see it with their other edge guy they take. They're going now for these speedy, explosive, bendy outside rushers for this 3-4 now, as opposed to the bigger, stronger guys from the 4-3.
Are they going to have him standing up the whole time, or are they going to put his hand in the dirt?
He could put his hand in the dirt. He did it a lot at Penn State. I think he's best as a stand-up guy. I think his thing is that, like, he's never really going to be this guy that's going to push back offensive tackles in the run game. He can hold his own, and he's really good as a backside pursuit penetration style player. He had like 18 and a half tackles for loss or something. Yeah. So, I mean, he will be elite from the backside, and he can certainly hold his own against the run. He's never going to be this like behemoth of a 5 tech that's going to push back, offensive tackles in the run game. That's not his style. But let's be honest, we had 18 sacks. We need the pass rushers more than we need the run defenders, and we got Ogundeji, who's a bigger sort of guy to play that role on base downs, and we needed the pass rusher more.
We also need guys in the middle. It's bare. Foye is gone. Dion is at least on a downward slope the last 2 years. I don't know how other kindly way I can put it, other than just saying he's played like dog crap. So I'll be kind about it. Say he's on the downward slope, could turn it around, maybe get the first 2 years of Dion back again. Who knows? But that said, Listen, I know you love the draft, but how much Montana State football did you watch?
I actually watched Troy Andersen. Shout out to Bozeman, by the way, which is where Montana State is. I love Bozeman. I go out
You
to
and the
Big
Duttons,
Sky
I
a
think,
lot.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you and the Duttons from Yellowstone.
Yeah. So I ski at Big Sky every year. So I love Bozeman. I actually familiar with Montana State a little bit. There's not a lot of tape on him out there, but what you can see is that, look, this guy, his story is really cool. 0-star recruit out of high school, comes in to play running back. Their quarterback gets hurt. He plays quarterback, is all-conference quarterback. Then they're like, okay, next year, can you play running back again? Sure, all-conference running back. Then the next year, they're like, you know what, how about you play linebacker? Sure. Then this year, he's all-conference linebacker. So I think defensive player of the year for the conference. And this is a guy who's played linebacker for 2 years total. So the instincts aren't fully there. The tackling technique is lacking. All of the stuff about playing defense, it's coming to him. Like we're getting there with that. But in terms of athleticism, he's a perfect 10. 10.0 RAS, which means best ever tested at his position. 4.42 40-yard dash, which is faster than Kyle Pitts, by the way, just slightly, but it is faster. And his agility drills are absurd, like a 6.773 3-cone or something like that. Like in terms of athleticism, there's nothing he can't do. Like this is going to be one of the most athletic linebackers, if not the most, from day one. So he just needs to get the rest of the position down. I think he can play sub packages early, passing down stuff. Like put him in man coverage and just say, go chase this guy. He can do that. He's really athletic. And in man coverage, a lot of it is, can you keep up with the guy? And he can. He can cover tight ends. He's got the size, 6'3", 245. I think in terms of zone coverage, he needs to work on his instincts. In terms of the tackling, obviously that's a work in progress. Overall, reading and reacting, he's so fast. He has more of a cushion to read and react because of how quickly he can recover. I think it's not going to be a huge defensive role for him this year unless he really hits the ground running. I think towards the back half of the season, we're going to see him starting potentially. But special teams, he's going to be a demon. He might be the best special teams player in the NFL this year. That's how athletic and dynamic he is. And we know that he's a quick learner. He's played 3 positions in college in 4 years and was all conference at like every single one. So this is a guy that is going to learn these positions. He's going to come hit the ground running quick, but how quick? I mean, the NFL is a different beast, so who knows?
Never hurts to have smart kids, as they say, right?
Yes.
Before we're going to skip over Desmond Ridder, we'll get to him in a minute. But the Tyler Allgeier out of BYU, I saw a comparison to James Conner for him, which if I get the James Conner in Pittsburgh, yeah. If I get the James Conner for like a 4-game stretch last year in Arizona, yeah. That's not a bad comparison. But obviously, this is a kid from day one who in week 1 is going to be seeing reps and getting snaps in the backfield.
Yeah. I'm going to pull up Connor's RAS real quick because, in terms of size, Connor's a little bit bigger. Connor is taller, like 6'1.5". Allgeier's a little bit more compact, which I actually think is a good thing for running backs, to be honest. A little bit lighter, 224, but that's still plenty of weight there. But the thing about Allgeier that I really liked is his explosiveness is really good. Like his long speed, not necessarily special, 4.6, which is slightly above average for NFL running backs, but it's not breakaway burning speed. But 10-foot broad jump, really explosive. 1.56 10-yard split. Again, that short area quickness, that burst is what he's got. And I think
he's going to need it because the holes aren't going to be that big and they're that long. So you better get through them quick.
Exactly. And so with Allgeier, his thing in college, from what I've heard from people I trust, when the blocking was there, this is maybe the most dangerous running back in college football in terms of production. Like he just takes off for 10, 15-yard chunks every time he gets any sort of space in front of him. He does read the hole well. He's really explosive. 23 touchdowns in college, like a red zone monster. When the blocking wasn't there, he was pretty average. But, I think you could say that about a lot of running backs at this point. Yeah. So the Falcons are banking on the run blocking getting better with this pick. But I think if they can get it to an average to above average place, this is a guy that's going to be a possible dynamic threat on early downs. And that's what they sort of need with, Cordarrelle Patterson probably taking the high leverage carries, third downs, and Damian Williams a good sort of like lightning to the thunder. But yeah, I like the pick. It's just the run blocking has to get better or he's not going to be maximized.
All right, Desmond Ridder, final thought here. And I said this yesterday and I'll continue to say it until the season starts, and I'll say it by week 8 if I don't see this plan set in motion. They have one goal with Desmond Ridder this year, absolutely one. And they have to have an answer by the time the season ends. And that's, can the kid play? Period. Which means he needs to see live game reps. He needs to see multiple live game reps and start, and he has to be able to play in leverage situations to find out if he can play. Again, they threw Joe Burrow to the Wolves with no offensive line and subpar talent. The Cincinnati Bengals lost games, but he made them competitive, right? And that's the big thing. Can he make this team competitive? Can he play? You could see that Burrow could play. That's the only job that they have. I don't care what the situation is. And barring them starting out 7-1, he should be on the field. Like, that's just what it boils down to. And if they don't do that, they're derelict, because of what you need to understand is that if this guy can't play, guess what? Next year, you got to get another one.
Yeah. And that's the thing about the third round pick too, is that it sort of takes the pressure off of Ridder. In fact, it probably gives him positive pressure in that he's got the chip on his shoulder now, instead of feeling like he has to like justify his pick. Now he's like, I got to prove everyone wrong. I think that's much better for him overall, his long-term projection. But, yeah, exactly what you said. Like, I think either we're going to know that Marcus Mariota is our quarterback because we're like 7-1 and rolling, or we're going to get a chance to see Ridder. And I think we're going to see multiple games of Ridder at least. And I don't think it's out of the question that Ridder wins a quarterback competition. I think it's unlikely, just because I don't think Mariota's a bad quarterback. Mariota's thing has always been durability, and this offensive line is not good. Hopefully it'll be better, but
if you're going to have an offensive line that stinks, have a quarterback that can run, and Ridder can run.
Yeah. Yes.
So there is that.
Yeah, so I think we're going to see Ridder sooner rather than later. I would be surprised if we haven't seen them at all by mid-season. But I think at the very least, once they're eliminated from the playoffs, we'll see him for 3 or 4 games at minimum. And like you said, we just need to know. But I think Ridder will be a fringe starting quarterback this year. Like he'll sort of, I don't know that he'll be like overly impressive, but we'll see. But I think of quarterbacks that you usually get in the third round, I think he's got a much better shot than most guys that you get that late to make it. So,
and here's the comparison I'll come up with here, and we got to finish up. But Jalen Hurts was drafted in the second round. By all accounts, nobody really thought he was a second-round quarterback. A lot of people had him with a third-round grade, and it's the exact opposite for Desmond Ridder. People thought he might have been a first-round quarterback. Most likely a second, gets drafted in the third. Regardless, the calls are going to come early and often for him to play, and those calls are accurate. If the Falcons aren't going to play him this year, again, it's an indictment to me on the process, because I just don't understand what they're hoping to achieve. They got to figure out if this kid can play in 2022.
Yeah. So either Mariota's a home run hit, and we're going to be starting Mariota for the next few years because he's awesome, or we're going to see Ridder sooner rather than later. So I'll let you decide which one you think is more likely. So.
All right. Make sure you guys give him a follow at Falcoholic. Kevin, part of the Falcoholic staff. Great work from all those guys there. Kevin, appreciate the time. Thanks, man. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
All right. We'll be back, and we'll hopefully have assuaged some of the panic of Atlanta Braves fans. That's next.